Today is the final or the third installment for the 2020-03 Q1 release. We did a couple webinars this week already. If you missed those, the recordings are already available. We'll make the recording of this one available later today. This one is all about the Google Maps component for Servoy, which we updated recently and added several new features. So this will be kind of a fun one, mostly for demos. And then we'll just do a quick overview. So what I plan to show is there's some new options around marker, what you can, like the different markers on the map. So I'll show some of those options. There are routing options as well. So I'll show those. We added routing in the last release, but now you can actually get the route info back. So we'll take a quick look at that. Some more options around how you center and pan and zoom and support for gesture handling on touchscreen devices. And then we added support for Kml, and I'll explain what Kml is. The tradition with these webinars is we like to do some demos first. We like to get into the code, get under the hood, go a bit off script and have some fun, and then do a quick overview. I typically prepare the demo part of this in the morning before the webinar, which always puts a little bit of pressure on. Today I had a nice addition added, but then I had to scrap it because I messed it up. So what I'll do is have some fun and code it on the fly for you. So we'll go a bit off script and hopefully it doesn't get too dangerous. So let's get started with some demos. First things first, I'm going to go into my Servoy IDE. I have an example solution here. This is available from the Google Maps package. You can download and install this example through the package manager. If you go to your solution or to Servoy packages and click download and install, you can get the component and the example. And what I'm going to do is launch the example. And the first thing it's going to do is ask me for my Google Maps API key. So a few years back, Google started requiring an API key to embed a map on your application or your web page. An API key is free. There are some limitations in terms of usage. You can't, I think, make 1 million requests in a second or something like that. But it's quite easy to get a key. If you go to console.cloud.google.com and go to the menu, I think APIs and services, and then credentials, take you to a page that looks like this, and you can generate API keys and set whatever limitations or restrictions you want for those keys. I have one here. I'm going to copy it to my clipboard and paste it in here. And now you can see that my map is available. If I click through the map, it's centering on the location. These are orders from the sample database, and it's using the address field or the fields for making the map marker. Now, something we added in the last release, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so, was the support for multi-markers and clustering. So this is not new, but what's nice here is we auto zoom to the extent. So if I put in several markers, you can see that the map is automatically zooming to the extent with a little bit of padding around that marker set. So on record selection, I'm just passing the marker addresses into the map. Something else we added was the ability to do a radius. So I'm gonna set private. I call it privacy mode, but it's really just a radius, and zoom in on one of these markers, and you can see now that there's a radius around it. You could remove the marker as well, and then you have kind of like a privacy mode where you don't want to show the exact location, but you want to show the radius around it, or you want to show, everything, within a kilometer of the location or something. Then you can do that with a radius. I want to take you under the hood a bit here and look at how we set this up. So I'm going to go into my application. I have a grid here, and on record selection of the grid, I'm just taking the selected records in the found set. That's a multi-select enabled, and I'm passing those in to a method that I wrote on the form where the map is. And in this case, I am dealing directly with the component that I put on the map. So if we open up the order detail and we take a look, you can see that there's a component here, which is the Google Map component. Again, when you add this via the package manager, you can just drag and drop this on your form, and then you can start to set the design time properties and also write code for it. In the example here, I have a single method to draw the markers. And what I do is I get the selected records, I pass them into this method, and then I iterate over them and I build up a marker. Now, this is an array of markers, and you can see the type is the Google Map markers. If I were to type in marker dot, I'm going to get code complete because that's a defined type. So you don't have to guess these things or use strings. You can get code complete, which is nice, and it gives you the data type as well. So one thing that I'll do is I'll set the info window string, and I'll show you how I can click on the marker and get an info window, which is also a new feature. So suppose I want to make it data driven and I want to use some markup. So I'm going to put a bold tag or a strong tag here and pass in just a touch of markup and also a bit of data, and I'm going to grab the record and get the orders to customers, company name, and then maybe I want to put a break tag in there and put in we have a calculation which gives us the order total. Yeah, maybe I want to format that a bit too. Always a bit of lag when I have GoToMeeting. So here what I've done is maybe I'll put a $sign. So now what I've done is added an info window so that if I click on it, it should render this, and it's data driven and it has markup. So let's give it a shot. Turn off the privacy mode here. So now you can see I have the customer name, which is joined in from a related table, and I have a formatted view of the order total, which is actually a calculation. It's not even a physical column in the database. So a lot of dynamic stuff can go on. You can also mix that with markup, and you can set that as the info window. Another thing you can do is you can set tooltips. So I can set the tooltip, and I could do something else, maybe sales rep, and do order to, it should come from the record. It's passed in. Order to employees. So this is another related table, and there's a calculation there as well. I'm using a module that has some relations and some calculations already built into it to help me along. So now I've added a tooltip, and I should be able to pick a different guy here. And when I mouse over, you can see it says who the sales rep is, and I get the info window if I click it. So those are the main options added for markers there. Oh, I forgot one thing, the icon URL. So here I have the icon URL is hard coded, and this is it used to just be that generic Google Maps pin, but now you can use a URL, which allows you to use a gallery of third-party icons, or you can even make your own if you want to get fancy. If you go to the Google Maps documentation, and they give you links to other icon libraries. So suppose these are all restaurants, I can copy the link address here, come in and change this. And of course, this could be depending on the type of record you have, and you can change the icons. So coming back to my sample, I should be able to start to show some restaurants on a map. So now that adds support for bringing in different kinds of icons. So those are the changes made for the icons. Another change that we made is we exposed the API for for the zoom level. If we go to the design of this form and slide over here, put a little slider on the form here, and this is data bound to a form variable I put on the form. But when the data change of that happens, I'm setting the zoom level. So if you look at the setup of the form here, and we look at the zoom level property, that's now fixed to that data provider. So it's a data bound thing. Anytime I change the zoom level, it's going to change that. So here I just made a simple, slider, and I can zoom with that. But you could also have that be data driven because it's fixed to a data provider. So that was added in the last version. The other thing is that we can programmatically center on an address or on a lat long. Now these are just going to be some random ones because it does that by default on the markers here. But I click this and it centers on an address, and if I click this, it will center on a lat long. And I just want to show you the methods for that. So center on address here. It's using one of the markers, but it just calls this method on the map. So you can center on any address, or you can center on any lat long, which is just the coordinate pair. You pass those in as numbers. So that's useful if you want to programmatically move the map around without it just coming from the markers. Another thing that we added support for was control over gesturing. And this has to do with how the map works with a touchscreen. And I can try to demo this as well. First, I'll show you the property. If you look on the, let me drag this out of the way here. If you look on the properties here of the component, there's something here called gesture handling. The default is auto. And what that means is that it's gonna interpret touch gestures based on the overflow of the map. So if you put one finger on the map and you slide it, it will pan the map. But if it has scroll bars, then it will first scroll. So that's auto. Now you might want to say, no, I always want to pan, and that's going to be I think it's called greedy. Don't ask me why. That's what they named it. And then if you want it to be where it's going to require two fingers, then it's going to be this one called cooperative. So I'm actually going to save that and come in here, and I do have a touchscreen monitor, so maybe I can show you this. I'm going to touch it with one finger, and now you can see that it's saying use two fingers to move the map. Now I'm going to touch it with two fingers, and I can move the map, and I can do the pinching and panning with my fingers. So you have some control over what happens there. If I blow this way up, yeah, see now I have scroll bars here, and if I come and change the setting to greedy, where it's always going to assume that I want to do a finger pan, then it's panning the map, but it's not changing the scroll bars. If I put it back to auto, it's going to detect. It should detect that there's scroll bars, and I believe. No, not quite. I think it has to do with where the overflow is on the outside here, not on the map itself. Anyway, you can play with that, but it's really those two settings, greedy or cooperative, that it's one or two finger. Also, the same applies with the mouse wheel. If you have it set for cooperative, the mouse wheel won't zoom in and out like that. Let's get into route mapping or route mapping. We added this in the last version of this component, but we added some extended options for it. So you can turn on route mapping, and then it'll automatically draw. I should probably relaunch the client here because I'm making all these changes in developer. Try to see. Oops, that was not the API. That was the URL to my icon. Do this once more. And go again. You need your API key. I copy it to my clipboard. I paste it here, and there we go. Now, if I turn on route mapping, And you can see that when I select, here I'll select 3, and you can see now it does the route between those 3. That was supported in the last version of this, but what we added were 2 things. Number 1, we added some additional options. So you can say, I want to always optimize it. My travel mode is driving, avoid ferries, tolls, and highways, right? So I could change the travel mode to transit. I'm going to save that and I'll launch the client just to be safe. Paste in my API key. So now if I put the 2 of these, it will try to find, I don't think it found a transit route for that. But you can experiment with that. Maybe within France I get one. Nope. So there's those, but then there's also
routing.
What's that?
You forgot to toggle the routing.
Ah, thank you. That's why I really need to have a moderator on these webinars. Let's try this again. 0 results. Yeah, I mean it catches it and does a little pop up. Yeah, well, there's not a transit route between those. Another thing that let me change this back to driving and show you one more thing. Oops, click on the wrong one. Come on. Direction settings. They put bicycling in there. That must just be for Dutch people. Okay. Now let's see if I have to relaunch the client or not. Yeah, I gotta relaunch it. And doesn't push that down to the browser. A lot of stuff when you're working in Servoy Developer will push it out to the client, but some things require you to quickly relaunch the browser. There we go. Okay, so now one more thing, as you can see, I have the screen still on. You can see the total distance and total duration here. You can actually get the route details, and I'll show you how I put those in the screen here, because that was something that was requested after we added the routing options. If we go into the code here, and we look at the on route changed event. Now this is an event you can hook to the component, and I'll show you how that was done. If you look at the properties of the component, there's just one event here, on route changed. You hook that up to a method, and every time it does a rerouting, it'll pass to you the objects in the route, and that is an array of these leg objects, and they have the start and end address and the distance in meters and the duration in seconds. Don't ask me why, but you can display seconds however you want. I didn't format it or anything. And so you can show the total or you can show the legs. So a nicer demo of this would be to put it in a memory data source and show you kind of a nice formatted view of the route. So we do have a number of customers who are using like delivery apps for drivers, truck drivers, and that sort of thing, and they do have route mapping. And so this would be a nice feature where you can actually include the route in your application rather than sending it out to another application. So that's a nice use case for this. So one other thing that I want to show you is support for something called Kml. Now, Kml is a markup language that's used to render geographic features on a map. And those could be points, lines, polygons, and that's sort of the standard format in the world of Google Maps and Google Earth. And so you might want to have, if you have more complex geometries or features, you can generate KML, which has a bit of the formatting built into it, and inject that onto your map. Or you can find third-party data sets and say, I want to show some, train lines from the government or something, and lay them on top of my map. So I'm going to just click the Enable Chicago KML. And these are the metro lines in Chicago. If you click on them, they give you a bit of info. Red line, blue line, that's what they're named. And I'll just show you how that is set. It's pretty easy. There's, on the configuration of the component, there is something called the Kml Layer URL, and that's just a data provider. So it's data bound. It could be, you can change it dynamically. And then if you look at the method here, all I did was send the URL into that data provider, and it immediately responds because it's data bound. So that's just an example of the Chicago Metro line. But you can, if you search the internet, there's a lot of government agencies publish their data sets in KML, and you can also generate KML yourself. It's just a markup language. So you can have points, lines, and polygons for different geographic features. So that was a request that came in a few weeks ago. We added to the component. So that's pretty much all I wanted to demo. I want to take you through a quick overview of what we just saw and what's new. Again, in this release of the Google Maps component, we can now do marker icon URLs, and those can be third-party URLs. There's a lot of galleries out there you can choose from, or you can make your own custom icons. We provide a radius option, so you can set the radius in meters, and it'll draw the radius, and there's some color and that sort of thing around your marker, and that's good for privacy mode. So you could scramble a location a bit and draw the radius and show it in privacy mode, like they do on Airbnbs and stuff. You can also show ranges with that. So just show a radius of what you want around your marker. You can now click on a marker and show some info window, and that can be text and markup, and of course it can be data driven. You saw that I joined in some data from a couple tables plus a calculated value. You can do the same for tooltips as you do for info window. Something I didn't show, but it's very simple, is there's a little label you can put on the marker itself. There's not much room, so that we were just doing one letter in that case. There's options for panning and zooming. So something that wasn't in the last release is that when you're passing in multiple markers into the component, you can auto zoom to the extent. So that's not something you have to program, it just happens automatically. And we have APIs to center the map on either an address or a lat-long coordinate pair. Also, the zoom level itself is a data-bound property of the component. So my example was just hooked up to a slider, but you could also have that be something that you're changing depending on the record that's selected. So that's up to you. We added support for gesture handling. Again, that's really how you handle one finger or two finger pans. And the reason for that is if you have a map which overflows and then you get a scroll bar, you may want to scroll instead of pan. So it's up to you if you want to turn that on or off. And again, that also affects the mouse wheel too. If you turn it to cooperative, then you get no mouse wheel, and you have to use the two finger. If you put it to none, you can totally disable pinching and panning on touchscreens. Route options were in the last release, but it was kind of limited. Now we could just enable routing, but now we added some of the options, including the travel mode, and if you want to avoid tolls and ferries and things. Also, we added that method to retrieve the legs, which is the JSON object, and you could render that however you want. And finally, we added Kml Support, which again is a markup language for geographic features. You can add layers to your map. And there's lots of third-party layers you can go out and get. There's also a way to generate that custom. So I'm going to leave up some useful links here. There's the project home is on GitHub. All the wiki documentation is updated there. All the different options are documented. Again, if you want to get your Google API key, you go to console.cloud.google.com, and you can just generate a new API key, and you have to pass that in when you start up. Otherwise, it won't render the map. This is a typo from the last webinar, copy-paste problem, so you can ignore that last one. So I'll leave these links up. Everything's available through the Servoy package manager. Rutger, do we have questions?
Yes, we do. Somebody's asking if there is an API method for geocoding an address into lat-long.
Not exposed through this component. There is a way to do that that's fairly simple, but I guess for this webinar, it's a bit off topic. I'm happy to take that question offline. but we don't do it through the component, but there's a way to call it through Google with your API key. It's quite simple.
All right. Another question is about optimizing the route. Is there an option to calculate the best route rather than the order the addresses were selected?
I believe that optimization does that it can reorder them. So, but I forget. I didn't actually develop the feature where it passes in the optimization. So I don't know if it reorders the stops for you or not. If it does, you can get it back when you call the on route changed handler.
Okay. Another question about routing. Is it possible to calculate the fastest route over like 20 addresses?
Yeah, that's what it does. That's what the optimized route does.
Okay, that's exactly okay.
Yeah.
Another question about Kml. Is it possible to get a Kml file from media? Can you ship a Kml with your solution, or can you make it dynamic?
Yes, you could do that. Any file resource you can include in your solution and then get a dynamic URL to it. I don't have a good example of how to do that, but if you want to mail me privately, I'll answer it offline or post on the forum.
Okay.
Yeah. You could embed it in your media folder. I think what the attendee's asking is you could embed it in your solution in your media folder, and then you can get a dynamic URL at runtime to that resource. So you could ship your KML with your solution.
Okay, cool. No other questions I see.
Okay, Rutger, do you want to remind everyone about the roundtable one more time before we go out?
Yeah, sure. April 1st, as we said before. It will be a roundtable discussion panel where we will be discussing a couple of challenges you might face due to the coronavirus, business challenges. We invited a couple of CAP members to join, so they will be part of the panel.
CAP means Customer Advisory Board. Servoy's Customer Advisory Board.
Our Customer Advisory Board members. So I know that Jonah, STB definitely will be joining, and a couple of others, which I don't know out of my head. Again, the registration link is in the chat panel. Also, you should have received an email about this webinar. And we were looking forward to see you April 1st, Wednesday. For now, I would say stay healthy, stay safe, and have a nice weekend.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Ciao, bye.
Oh, bye.